Hello, everyone. Saturday salutations, and welcome once again to Mathematical Morality. This week, we're releasing 2 episodes over the course of the weekend, as we're getting close to the holidays, and frankly, I thought that there were 2 important issues that needed to be covered over the course of this weekend. This episode is called the famous I Was Just Following Orders, firstly because of the fact that we're celebrating International Human Rights Day. On this day in 1948, the United Nations adopted a universal set of human rights that apply to us all. We honor this milestone towards creating a more free and equal world. However, there is the international community also, dealing with human rights violations, etc. There seems to be a common thread which is popping up again, which was even had a precedent set against it at the Nuremberg trials in 1945. The concept of "I was just following orders." The main reason for this is the fact that there are a number of issues which actually prevent whistleblowers from being able to talk about things like mass surveillance on society. I mean, the fact that Edward Snowden is still living in Russia for having violated the Espionage Act of the United States and still hasn't been pardoned for letting the American people know that the NSA and the CIA were basically spying on them. That's a major problem. But there's also another more mathematical reason as to why it is difficult to get people to stop following orders and to actually try to fight against unjust authority. This specifically ties to an experiment done back in the 1950s called the Milgram Experiment. Just to give you an idea of what this experiment looks like, the experimenter here asks the learner over here a series of questions. And for every answer that they get wrong, the teacher, who is over here on the right-hand side, is supposed to keep hitting these switches in succession, giving the learner a much higher and higher electric shock, more painful electric shock every time, in order to try to convince the learner to do what's right, to correctly answer the questions. Basically, in other words, the experimenter, an authority figure, is telling the teacher to torture the learner in order to be able to make sure that they start learning more effectively. And these experiments would keep these experiments would go until the teacher basically said stop. And would not continue any further. What they discovered, however, during the Milgram experiments was that a full 50% of teachers who were the actual experimental subjects would actually follow the orders of the experimenter and go all the way to the topmost setting, supposedly quote unquote killing the learner. I mean, the learner, of course, was a Confederate in the experiment, but the point was that a full 50% of people would listen to an authority figure and basically continue torturing somebody when told to, just because it was an authority figure. So with half the population, even just from the Milgram experiment, being susceptible to the appeal to authority fallacy, this is at least a very much a psychologically ingrained thing in our psyche that needs to be seriously addressed. Couple this with the fact that that people who go against authority in this culture are actually penalized, even if the order is unjust. Just goes to show why our society is so oppressive still, and there's very little in the way of actual exposure of when governments or businesses are doing unethical practices. Anyway, just thought I'd mention this as a possible problem that needs to be addressed, and leave your thoughts in the comments below as to how much this actually influences society and what we can do to fight it. In the meantime, happy trails and thanks for watching Mathematical Morality.